let me look. I have 10 different problems here.
Okay.
And I just need to learn how to do them. And then we're all good.
Let's verbalize them, and I'll write them down, and we'll solve them. Hold on one second.
The first one.
Let me get to the new page here. They changed this program, so you got to scroll up to get to a new page, not down. Wow. Okay, go ahead. Merrick?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, go ahead. Start verbalizing the problem.
Oh, my bad. The first one we have is parentheses 5, -3. And parentheses 7, 2. And this has 4 parts to it. One of them being is find M.
I'm clearly missing something. That's not the problem, correct?
Oh no, it's 5, -3 and 7, 2.
So that's 2 points in the XY coordinate plane.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So what we need to do is find M.
Okay. What's the definition?
Is the first thing.
M.
It's Y, isn't it? Like Y slope?
Nope. M is slope.
Okay.
Slope of that line. In other words, what you've been given here is 2 points. Well, 2 points define a line. And M is slope of that line. So what's the general definition for M? It's the one I really want everybody to memorize.
You said slope, right?
What is slope?
It's the like how much it raises or lowers.
Rise over what?
Run.
Yeah, we seem to have an echo.
Do we? I wonder why.
You don't hear it? You don't hear it? If you don't hear it, I won't worry about it.
I don't hear it.
Okay, good. All right. Now, the exact definition of the slope is y sub 2 minus y sub 1 divided by x sub 2 minus x sub 1. But what that really is the change of the y relative to the change of the x. You understand all 3 of those parts of that multi-equation?
Mm-hmm.
Okay? This is y sub 1, that's x sub 1. This is y sub 2, that's x sub 2. Plug it in. What is the slope?
Hold on, I'm just writing all that down.
Well, you know, I'm going to suggest something, Merrick, that you don't do that you pay attention fully to what we're doing on my screen.
Okay.
Now, if you want to watch a recording of this, you can do that. And then when you watch the recording, you should write it down if that is part of your learning process. But to do it while we're interacting merely wastes time.
Okay.
Because you can review this. And that's what my recommendation is to every student. Pay attention to what we're both doing together. And I do have a lot of students that think they learn best when they take notes in real time. I don't believe it. I don't think that's the best way to learn. I think the best way to learn is to give your full attention to what we're both looking at and what we're both talking about.
Okay.
So, what is M going to be here?
M is going to be, let me look, it's going to be 2 minus 3.
Nope. It's the biggest mistake made in algebra is dropping negative signs.
Minus -3.
Okay, that's huge. That changes the answer. You cannot drop negative signs. Be very, very careful about that. Everybody wants to do it because everybody hates negative signs. So when they see two of them in a row, they want to drop one of them. They'd rather drop both of them, but you can't. You gotta do the problem as it's given to you. What's the bottom going to be?
7 minus 5.
Okay. What's that answer?
So we get 5 over 2.
That's the slope.
Okay, cool.
The line that contains those 2 points. In other words, if I were to graph that, the first point would be about right there. Second point would be about right there. If I connect those with a straight line, that's a slope of about 5/2. The most important thing to remember is that it's whether it's positive or negative slope. Okay? And that looks like a slope of 5/2. That could easily be a slope of 5/2. If I ended up with a line like that, I know I'm wrong. In other words, I got the wrong sign on the slope. The one thing you absolutely have to be able to recognize is the difference between positive and negative slopes. You cool with that?
Yeah, I'm cool.
Okay. I mean, you feel like you're able to recognize the difference between positive and negative slopes?
Yepers.
What slope is that?
That's positive, isn't it?
What slope is that?
That's positive as well.
What slope is that?
That one's negative.
Okay, you can do it. What slope is that? A horizontal line.
That's neither, right? There's a name for it. I don't remember what it's called.
No, it's 0.
Just 0?
It definitely is 0.
Is there a name for it, though? Is there like a special term for that?
You're thinking about a vertical line.
Oh, a vertical line?
Vertical line, the slope is undefined.
Okay, so if it's a slope of 0, it's just, okay,
Horizontal.
I got you.
Horizontal.
Right.
Notice what happens as slopes change. In other words, you go from a slope of 1 to a slope of 1/2 to a slope of 1/4. What am I approaching? I'm approaching 0. By the time I hit a horizontal line, I'm at 0. Well, now let's go the other way. That's a slope of 2. That's a slope of 4. That's a slope of 100. So as I approach a vertical line, I approach infinity. And they would prefer to use the word undefined than infinity. But understand that it's really infinity. Okay? In other words, it's huge. Most people make the mistake, they say that's a 0 slope and that's a 0 slope. Well, the vertical line is not a 0 slope. That is an infinitely large slope. That's so far away from 0 on the number line that it's not silly. So there's a huge difference between 0 and undefined.
All right, cool.
What else did they ask you about these 2 points?
Point slope.
Okay, so when they ask you for the equation, most important thing to know is slope. Slope is 5/2. Second most important thing to know is what's the general equation of point slope? What does the point slope general equation look like?
I'm thinking y equals mx plus b, but I don't think that's right. Is that right?
Slope-intercept.
Okay. I don't remember the point slope.
Here's slope-intercept, and they're different. They're both the equations of a straight line, but point slope is a little bit easier to work with, especially when you're doing calculus. When you're doing calculus, point slope is the only thing you work with. And that's this.
Y minus y1. Okay.
Now understand that if you forget this, Well, divide both sides by that. What do you get? Slope is equal to what?
Isn't it you divide both sides by by the y, the
Nope.
y's, right?
Nope, nope, nope. Divide both sides by what I've underlined there. What do you get?
You get y minus y1 over x minus x1 equals m.
That's the rise over run. That's what that is, rise over run. So that's why I
Okay.
prefer my students to memorize slope is rise over run. Because if you always remember that it's rise over run, you can't go wrong. You don't need to memorize these exact formulas. You just need to know rise over run.
Okay.
So the rise is the difference in the y coordinates. The run is the difference in the x coordinates. Okay. Well, let's see what happens if I hit this there. Seem to have lost my eraser. That's okay. So, what are our... Now notice that point slope formula only requires one point and a slope. Well, we got the slope. We figured out the slope by using that formula for slope. So that's what we're left with. Now you can pick either of the 2 points. Give me the simplest one.
Okay, so
I don't have it on my page anymore. What's the simplest point? The smallest number?
probably 7 and 2.
7 comma 2?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What I usually go with are positive numbers and small numbers. That's what I use to determine which is the best point to pick.
Okay.
So now fill it in. What's my equation of that line?
So we'd get 2, or it'd be not 2, it'd be y minus 2, right?
Correct?
Equals 5 over 2, parentheses, x minus 7.
Yeah. And that is the equation of the line. And we don't have to do anything with that. That's the final format. That is the point slope format. If we were to do anything with that, like try to put it into slope-intercept format, y equal mx plus b, we'd be doing unnecessarily work. Especially,
Okay.
they asked for the point slope format, right?
Yep.
Well, this is point slope format. You do not simplify this in point slope format. That's it.
Alrighty, neato.
Okay.
Okay. The next one we have is y equals mx plus b, but we already know the slope.
Okay.
I just kind of forgot how to get like the b and stuff. Is x?
Well,
Do you
we'll go
plug in
through it.
x? Okay, so y equals pretty much 5 over 2.
What's the slope? 5 over 2?
Yeah, 5 over 2.
And what is 1 point?
5.
That's not a point. That's a number. What's an
Okay.
xy coordinate?
And xy coordinate, we have 7 and 2 again.
Okay. Now, if I start with y equal mx plus b as my general format, and that is that is slope-intercept. Notice why it's called slope-intercept. We have a slope, we have a y-intercept.
Okay.
Why it's called slope-intercept. Okay, so we know this much of it. We know the slope is 5/2 x plus b. Well, if I want to solve this, I got to solve for b. In other words, I want
Okay.
my final equation to be y equal 5/2 x plus some number. Well, to solve for b, I'm going to plug in the only point I know, 7 and 2, for x and y.
Okay. So we plug in 2 for y and then 7 for x. So we'd get 2 equals 5/2 times 7 plus b.
Now that's going to solve for b. Notice
Okay.
that's 35 halves plus b. I multiply everything by 2, I get 4 equals 35 plus 2b. You see how I got from that to that?
Yeah, I do.
See why I did it? It's because it simplifies it. When you can get rid of denominators, you don't have fractions anymore.
How did the 4 become a... Wait, never mind.
I multiplied both sides by 2.
Okay.
And when I multiply both sides by 2, I have to multiply every term on each side by 2. So that becomes a 4. This becomes 35, and this becomes 2b.
Cool.
Now solve that.
All right, so we get 4 equals 35 plus 2b.
2.
And then we would we subtract 35?
That gives you
Both
minus
sides?
31. What's b equal to?
B is equal to, so 31 equals 2b, then we divide by 2, and that doesn't go into it equally,
right.
so is that just the answer?
You cannot simplify that. Now,
Okay.
you could turn that into a proper fraction, minus 15 and a half, but you don't want to. Ratios are the name of the game in math. They really are. Proper fractions are not. I'm sorry that they ever named them proper versus improper, because improper fractions are what you want to give your answers in. You do not want to give that in a decimal. You do not want to give that answer like that. That's not the best answer either. That's the best answer.
Okay.
There's a reason for it. It's as you get into trig and calculus, fractions are what we work with. A fraction is better than a decimal, and it's certainly better than an improper, or rather a proper fraction.
All right, cool.
All right, what else we got here? Now,
Next thing is...
let's go back a second. Oh man. Not sure I know how to work this program anymore. They've changed it. But if we look at the equation that we came up with in point slope and compare it to the equation that we came up with in slope-intercept, they're the same. They have to be the same.
Okay.
Okay, here's the point slope. Okay, right here. If we distribute that, we get y equals 5 halves x minus 35 halves plus 2.
Okay.
That is the same as y equals 5 halves x. If I make that 4 halves, then I got minus 31 halves. That's our equation even when we did it with point slope format. If we keep working that equation, we get the same exact equation as we got with slope-intercept. In other words, when we did slope-intercept, we got that same thing. We got 5 halves x minus 15 and a half. I'm not sure I wrote that. Yeah, we kind of stopped. When we solved for b, now the final equation always has a y and an x in it. Okay, so you go back and you put the y and the x in, and the only thing left is what b was. So that is the answer for slope-intercept format.
Okay.
But it's the same equation. It's just in a different format. In other words, you can algebraically manipulate either equation to become the other.
Alrighty.
All right, what else you got, Merrick?
The last one we have is X-Intercept.
Okay. What's the equation?
I don't remember, actually. I have to look through my notes. Let me look.
Well, let's take the one we just had. Was it plus or minus 15.5? It was minus.
Was it 15.5 or was it negative 31? Because that was
You're right. No, you're absolutely right. It was negative 31 halves. After I stressed the importance of leaving it as a fraction. Okay,
right.
so if I want to graph that, I can graph it in the normal way, which would be to start where?
0.
No, start with the
Or in the,
y-intercept. That's the y-intercept.
okay.
So that's minus 31 halves. And then apply the slope.
So 5.
Yeah, I'm going to go up 5 and to the right 2. So there's my slope. Okay, now I've got a point there, I've got a point there. Any straight line is determined by 2 points. That's all I need. There's the equation of that. Now the question is, what is the x-intercept? Where does it cross the x-axis? Well,
Oh, that's all that is?
when they ask about the x-intercept, they're saying, where does it cross the x-axis? And they'll ask about the y-intercept also. Well,
Okay.
here's one thing you need to learn for sure and memorize it. That the x-intercept, what's the y-coordinate when I'm on the x-intercept?
Is it our slope?
What
Or
is
no, not
the
this.
y-coordinate when I'm at that point right there? There's the y-axis, there's the x-axis. What's the y-coordinate when I am on the x-axis?
It's the x, isn't it? Or no, it's like just a y whenever it lands on.
0, is it not?
Yeah, you're right.
Okay, so the x-intercept by definition means that the y-coordinate is 0. So let's take our equation and let's let y equal 0, and that's all we need to do. Now solve that equation. That will give us the x-intercept.
Okay, so we get 5 over 2x minus 31 over 2. Do we need to add 31 over 2 both sides?
There's a simpler first step that simplifies this equation a lot. What is it? I kind of have a rule. When I'm solving an equation, I want to get rid of my denominators and I want to lose my parentheses. Well, there's no parentheses here, but we do have a denominator that creates complicated fractions. So how can I get rid of the 2 in the denominator?
Can you divide by the reciprocal or multiply by the reciprocal?
I can multiply both sides of the equation by 2. So I got 2 times 0 equals 5 halves x times 2 minus 31 halves times 2. When I multiply both sides of the equation by 2, that's what I do. Okay? Well, the left side stays 0. That's wonderful. The right side becomes 5x minus 31. See how?
And then we can add 31.
You see how getting rid of denominators simplifies the equation enormously.
Yeah, I see.
You don't want to work with fractions if you don't have to. Okay?
Okay.
Now solve that.
So then I'd say we add 31 to both sides. And then we get 31. 31 equals 5x. And then you would divide by 5, then you get 31 over 5 equals x.
That's that point. That is the x-intercept. Now, I put the X and Y coordinates on there just to double emphasize that when you are on the X-axis, Y is 0. It doesn't matter where you're at on it. I could be way out here, Y is still 0. I could be way over here, Y is still 0. Okay?
All right. Sounds
Now
good to
let's
me.
figure out the X-intercept. What is the Y measurement when, let's figure out the Y-intercept. What is the X value when we are on the Y-intercept?
0.
Exactly. So that truism right there that you see, memorize that. Don't ever forget.
Okay.
When you're looking for X-intercepts, you just make Y 0 and solve. When you're looking for Y-intercepts, you make X 0 and solve. You'll notice that the Y-intercept is much easier. What's the Y-intercept here?
So we get y equals 5/2 times 0 minus
Whenever you
31
multiply
over 2.
something by 0, takes that term out.
Yeah, so it's
Doesn't
just
matter
y
what the
equals.
coefficient is. If X is 0, that term disappears.
So it just becomes y equals negative 31 over 2.
Exactly. So the coordinates on that Y-intercept are that. Make sure you put them in the right order. In other words, the X value has to be 0 by definition, and the Y value is whatever we calculated it to be. So when you're solving for X and Y intercepts, best way to do it is this way up here in the upper left.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
Thank you. The next one, let me get the next one. So the next one we have is 3, let me write this down, 3x minus 4y equals 9.
Okay, what's the
And then we have to find the m.
Okay.
Don't we just subtract 3x from both sides
Yeah.
first?
Well, it's hard to put this into point slope format, but it's easy to put it into slope intercept format. So if I can put it into y equals mx plus b, then I'll just read slope from whatever the coefficient of x is. So that's
Okay.
definitely the way to go. In other words, it's not so easy to take that equation and put it into point slope. That's a much more difficult proposition. It would answer our question, but I don't know how to do it. Whereas putting it into this merely means solving it for y. Okay, so after you subtract 3x, what do you have?
So if you subtract the x, you get a negative 4y equals negative 3x plus, is it just 9 or is it 9 over 3x?
9. At this point, all we've done is subtracted 3x from both sides.
Okay.
Now what's the
Cool.
next?
And then we have to divide by 4, negative 4 that is.
Divide both terms. So
Yeah, so then
that term
we
divided
get
by
y.
negative 4, and it's this term divided by negative 4. Now, we have enough to figure out our slope, but let's simplify all of this. In other words, let's put this in a little bit nicer format. Simplify
Okay.
is what I'm saying.
So we get negative 3 over 4x.
No. Got a negative in the numerator, I have a negative in the denominator.
So is that positive then because it's dividing?
Yes, when you divide two negatives, you get a positive. When you multiply
So you
two
get
negatives, you get a positive. So that's
okay.
the same as that. And
All right.
this all is the same as this.
Okay.
Okay,
Cool.
so the answer to the question is 3/4. But let's examine that a little bit. I want to explain that a little further. 9 over minus 4 is the same as minus 9 over positive 4, which is the same as minus 9/4. Make sure you understand that. It does not matter where your negative sign is.
No, I understand that. Yeah.
The numerator are out front. And usually when you're giving a final answer, you want it to be out front. In other words, B is that. If I'm going to graph this line, I'm going to start at minus 9/4.
Okay.
And then I'm going
My computer's about to die. I gotta go get my charger.
Okay.
It's at 2%. I'll be right back.
The only problem with all this fancy technology is that batteries can
Okay.
discharged.
It's all plugged in.
Of course, even if we were meeting in person, my car could run out of gas. Same thing. So I suppose it's not any more problems than it could occur without the technology. All right, what else we got?
Let's see. So we have to find X and Y points, which let me look. So to find the X and Y points.
More information. I don't know if you're talking about X and Y intercepts. I'm not sure what you're talking about.
So the question is like, I think it is X and Y intercepts. It's like 0 parentheses blank, or it's parentheses 0 blank, and then parentheses blank 0.
Okay. And there must be more information.
No, that's all we got right now. I think it's just the X-intercept. Or I think it's X and Y intercept, I would assume. It's just finding those points on a graph, pretty much.
Okay. Those points would suffice. But if I had a different line, those points would be the answer. And if I had a different line, these points would be the answer. So I need more information because you've given me a problem that has an infinite number of solutions.
Okay, that's what it says here, so I'll have to research that one a bit, so never mind on that one.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess we're done with that one for right now. Let me move on to the next one. Okay, here it says find the equation of a line perpendicular to y equals -2 over 3x plus 5 through 5 -3.
Okay. One of the other really key pieces of information you need to memorize is what perpendicular and parallel mean. If I have two slopes that are parallel, what does it mean?
It means they're like side by side and completely equal, just on different
They're
points.
the same slope. That's what it means. They're the same slope, right?
Uh-huh.
I have two parallel lines like that and that. They have identical slopes. What does
Yeah.
perpendicular mean? What
It
kind of
means
slope
it
does perpendicular have relative to the other line?
it's where they intersect, right? Like
Nope.
opposite kind of.
Real simple. You got to do two things to find the perpendicular slope. You got to change the sign and you have to reciprocate the fraction. So if I have a slope that's currently minus 2/3, then the perpendicular slope has to be what? I got to do two things. I got to change the sign. I got to reciprocate the fraction. So what would that be?
So would it just be 3/2?
Uh-huh. That's all you got to do. So
Okay.
the slope of the perpendicular, in this case, is 3/2, and it's going through that point. So we have a slope and a point. Let's use point slope format. That's the perfect thing to use when you have a slope and a point. What's the general format for point slope?
Point slope is y minus y1. So we'd have y minus
Let's give me the
3.
whole one. Give me the whole one.
Okay, y minus y1 equals m parentheses x minus x1.
Okay, now fill in.
So we have y minus 3 equals m
No,
x
what's
minus
M?
5.
What's M?
Oh, it's 3/2.
There's
And
your
then,
answer.
okay.
Now, did they specify what they wanted your answer in? What format?
I think they wanted, no, that's it. That's it.
Well, if they don't specify, then that is a perfectly good format. That is just as good as slope-intercept in terms of mathematics. If you submitted this to a panel of expert mathematicians, they would say that is just as good as y equal mx plus b format. It's not the same. If I put this into y equals mx plus b format, I've got to do some algebraic manipulation. But if they don't ask for that, then don't do all that extra work. In other words, that is the equation of that line. And even if I were to put it into y equal mx plus b format, it'd be the same line. It wouldn't graph any differently. It would just read a little differently.
Alrighty, cool.
Okay? So know that when you have a slope and one point, use point slope format. That's what it's designed for. It is one point and a slope.
Cool.
Okay, what else?
The next one we have is, hold on, let me switch papers so I can write this down. F of x equals x squared plus 2x minus 8.
What's their question?
Y and x-intercept.
Okay.
Okay, y-intercept.
Y-intercept's pretty easy. What's
Okay.
the x value when you're talking about the y-intercept?
0.
So what's the y-intercept? Remember that y is the same as f of x.
Is the y-intercept just -8?
Yeah, notice how easy it is to get the y-intercept. Because what happens is these terms that have x in them always just disappear. Whether it's multiplied by 2 or 2 million does not matter. Anything times 0 is 0. Now, the x-intercept's a little harder. What do I need to make 0 when I'm talking about the x-intercept?
Y.
Okay, so my equation becomes this. Remember, f of x is the same as y. The reason it exists because it's a little bit more robust. As you get a little more advanced in mathematics, f of x is the better terminology. You can do more things with it. Now, how do I solve that quadratic? when I have a quadratic, that's a quadratic, and I have it equal to 0, how do I solve it?
Do you
Give you a hint.
divide? Oh, you FOIL?
You factor it. You do the opposite of FOIL.
Oh, okay.
Remember, foiling is where you multiply these two linear terms together to get this quadratic. Factoring is where you do the reverse. Factoring is the harder. Yeah, foiling is easy, but factoring is a little harder. You know how to factor that expression?
So we'd get x and x in both the front of parentheses.
What are both
And
sides?
then we'd get a.
Next step is
It'd be
both
2
sides.
and 4.
What are
Okay, so it'd be 2 and 4. Both signs, is that what you said?
That's always the second step in factoring, is to determine both signs.
So it's x and y, wouldn't it be? It'd just be x and y?
Plus and minus.
Oh, that's what you mean. Okay.
In other words, I'm going to end up with a monomial term times a monomial term, producing this quadratic. Now, the only thing I know is that whatever numbers I put right here, they got to multiply to 8.
It'd be 2 and 4, wouldn't it?
Yes. Where's the 2 go? Where's the 4
I
go?
would say the 2 goes on the right side.
Yeah, you want the bigger of the factors to go, and that's 4, to go with the sign of the middle term. So immediately I put the 4 there and the 2 there. Okay? Now, when you factor a quadratic, the question always is, do you have the middle term correct? I know I got the x squared term correct. X times x is x squared, okay? And I know I have this term correct, because plus 4 times minus 2 is minus 8. It's the middle term that I'm wondering about. Well, the middle term is produced by the double smiley faces, which is the O and the I of FOIL. In other words, the outside of FOIL produces minus 2x. The inside of the FOIL, the I, produces plus 4x. Add them together, you get plus 2x. If that's your middle term, you've done it correctly.
Okay.
And don't overlook this process here, because when you run into more complicated quadratics, this is going to be a very important part of the process of factoring it, is this double smiley face here. You're always trying to figure out if you have the correct middle term. That's always the problem when you're factoring. Do I have the correct middle term with my answer? Okay, so I do.
Okay.
So I can make this statement that 0 equals that. Now, what x values satisfy that equation?
What do you mean, what x value satisfies that equation?
Well, I have two numbers multiplied together that equals 0. First rule of algebra is that one of those numbers has to be 0. And
it'd be the x.
Well, the way we solve it is to set each one of them equal to 0 and solve it. So I have an x-intercept at minus 4, and I have an x-intercept at positive 2. You see where I got both of those?
Yes, I did.
I set x plus 4 equals 0, solved it. That gives me x equal minus 4. I said x minus 2 equals 0, solve that. That gives me x equal 2.
Okay, cool. Yeah, alrighty. Okay. Next one we have is the vertex.
Okay.
And it says x minus b over 2a.
X minus b over 2a.
No, my bad. It's x. Let me write that whole again. That's not even right completely.
I know what it is. That's what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Okay. So if I have that same quadratic, x squared minus, was it minus 2x or plus 2x? Do you remember?
It was
I think it was
plus 2x.
2x, yeah, minus 8. So first of all, that's a quadratic, okay? And it's going to be a parabola. So it's going to be some kind of parabola like that. This is the most important point on that parabola. And in fact, the x value of that is the most important point on the parabola because that tells you your line of symmetry. That entire parabola is symmetric around that x value. So how do you get it? Well, x equals minus b over 2a. Tell me what a, b, and c are.
It just goes in order, doesn't it?
Uh-huh. A is the coefficient
Okay.
of the x squared term, b is the coefficient of the x term, and c is the constant.
Okay, so we just get, it's pretty much just x equals a squared, right?
Hold on. Not a squared. Minus b over 2a.
Okay, oh, so would it be 2a squared?
Well, what's minus b? Oh, okay, hold on. Let's go over here. This is not a bad thing to do every time you have a problem like this. Whether you're using the quadratic formula or not. We're not using the quadratic formula here, but we need to know what b and a are. Okay, so b is 2. What's minus b?
B is, that would be negative 2.
What's 2 times a?
2 times a, that is 1, so it'd just be 2.
That is minus 1. That means I've drawn this thing incorrectly. I should have drawn it where the vertex is at minus 1, like this. Okay? You see the
Okay.
black line to the left? I would change
Yeah, I do.
colors, but for some reason I have lost that ability to change colors here. I'm not quite sure why. No. Oh, here I could do it. I think. Program is not liking me today. Font color won't let me change it. Now,
Nice.
is what I was easily able to do is to figure out where this line of symmetry is. It's actually through the coordinate x equal minus 1. It's not this one over here. Okay?
Okay.
And that tells you the x value of the vertex. Minus b over 2a. It doesn't matter how complicated the equation is. Let me give you another one. If I told you y equals 2x squared minus 14x plus 10, tell me the vertex. The x coordinate of the vertex is minus b over 2a, which in this case is what?
So is minus b, would that just be positive 14?
Yep.
Okay. So you get positive 14 over 4.
That's the
And
x
then,
coordinate of the vertex.
okay.
Okay. If you want to know the y coordinate of the vertex, you take this answer, plug it in for x, and solve for y. And that'll tell you the y coordinate of the vertex, which is the second most important point. In other words, whenever you have a parabola, the most important point on that parabola is the vertex, both the x and the y coordinate. So minus b over 2a is a very straightforward, simple way to solve for the x coordinate. Solving for the y coordinate, a little bit more difficult. You got to take this answer and plug it in for x and then do the math.
Okay.
What do you
So
got as a next question? It'll probably address the y coordinate of the vertex?
Actually, the last one is, can f of x equal -8?
Okay.
And then that'll be all I got for right now after this.
Okay. So here's what we have. Here, I got x squared. Let me do this. I have f of x, which is the same as y, equals x squared plus 2x minus 8. They're saying, can f of x be what? -8?
Uh-huh.
They're saying, does this have a solution? If it has a solution, then absolutely y can be -8. Sometimes there's certain numbers that y might not be able to be. Notice that if I graph this parabola, y only goes that low. If I said, can y be -100, the answer is no. -100 does not appear on that parabola anywhere. -100 is off the screen to the bottom. Y is never -100. The question is, could it be -8? Well, the only way to answer that is to see if you can solve that equation. Okay? And the way you solve that equation is the way you solve all quadratics, which is to make one side 0. So I'm going to add 8 to both sides. So I get 0 equals x squared plus 2x. Does that have a solution? I'm going to factor an x out. I get x plus 2. What's the solution?
It's x squared plus 2x.
No, if I tell you that 0 equals x, that's just multiplying it back together again.
Okay.
It's better to have it in factored form. And here's why. Most important rule in algebra. If I'm multiplying two numbers together that equals 0, then one of them has to be 0. You cannot find any two numbers in the universe that multiply together equaling 0 unless one of them is 0. So what this equation tells me is that x has to either equal 0 for this part or -2 for the other part.
Okay.
In other words, that part would be x equal -2, making that equal to 0. Now, what that says is that my parabola must look like this. Hold on, not upper left, sorry. Let's see, when x is 0, y is -8. And when x is -2, y is -8. So my parabola must look like that. Now, do you see from the graph? In other words, x is 0 there, and y is -8. And x is -2 there, and y is still -8. So yes, -8 is a solution. If I'd have said, can y be -20, would not have been able to solve that quadratic. In other words, if you look at the parabola, you can see that that's the lowest that y can be right there. In other words, if I said, can y be -20, can it be way down here? No, it's not on that parabola. And you would discover that by attempting to solve that equation with a -20 for y, and it wouldn't solve. It would give you an imaginary solution. Have you had imaginary numbers yet?
Not a little bit, yeah.
Okay. When you get imaginary numbers, it basically means the parabola does not cross the X-intercept. In other words, over here on the lower right, if I had a parabola that looked like that, I would not, you notice there's no x-intercepts, right? When you
Yeah.
have no x-intercepts, it means the solution to that quadratic equation is imaginary solutions only.
Imaginary solutions only.
Yeah, when you have imaginary solutions, it does not cross the x-axis. You end up with a parabola that's above the x-axis. Notice there are no places where this parabola on the lower right here crosses the x-axis. Meredith, I do have a 3:30 today that I got to run to. Let's see. You scheduled a half-hour session at 5:30.
Yeah.
You still doing that?
Yeah, that'll work for me if it
Okay,
works for you.
absolutely. I'll talk to you at 5:30.
Okay, see ya.
All right, Merritt. Bye-bye.
Thank you.